If a 21-mile stretch of water in the Middle East gets blocked tomorrow, I mean, standard economics says global energy prices go up, right?
Right, yeah, we all expect that.
Exactly. We expect the oil spike. But what standard economics completely misses is that your grocery bill will suddenly skyrocket.
Yeah.
The cost to check a bag on your next flight is going to jump like $10, and global food security will just completely fracture. So today we are looking at the hidden forces running our world.
It's a profound realization when you finally see the underlying mechanism here. We really like to believe the global economy is, something we can track on a neat, organized dashboard.
Yeah, like a spreadsheet.
Exactly. But the reality is far more opaque. The landscape we are navigating right now is dictated entirely by unseen vulnerabilities.
And that is exactly what we are digging into today. Welcome to this deep dive. I mean, we have a massive stack of sources from late March and early April of 2026.
We really do.
Yeah, and our mission today is to cut through all the noise to find out what is actually driving these shifts for you, the listener. We're looking at everything from volatile tech stocks and international conflict to dating app scandals and, well, brand new rules for your retirement account.
Because when you lay all these sources out on the table, a very clear, unifying theme emerges. We are really tracking the ripple effect of hidden bottlenecks.
Hidden bottlenecks. I like that.
Yeah, whether it's a geographic choke point just choking off global food supplies or, a new software algorithm threatening a multi-billion-dollar hardware boom.
Right, or even a data leak breaching consumer trust.
Exactly. Today's deep dive is all about how these unseen choke points dictate the global economy and, honestly, your daily life.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the most glaring physical bottleneck on the planet right now.
Oh, absolutely.
We are looking at this really stark report from the Kiel Institute that details the March 2026 closure of the Strait of Hormuz. And obviously, this closure is driven by the escalating conflict involving the U.S., Israel, and Iran.
And, just to jump in real quick before we dive into the numbers, we need to be incredibly clear with you, the listener. We are absolutely not taking sides in this political or military conflict.
Right, 100%.
We are not endorsing any viewpoints from the left, the right, or any faction involved here. Our goal is strictly to impartially report on the economic realities and just the raw data outlined in the Kiel Institute's research.
I'm really glad you mentioned that because the data itself is, frankly, heavy enough. I know the Strait is a major energy corridor, but what is the actual scale of the blockage we're talking about here?
Well, the numbers are just staggering. That single narrow waterway handles roughly 21% of the world's oil.
Wow, 21%.
Yeah, and 25% of its liquefied natural gas. But, as massive as those energy figures are, they really aren't the scariest part of this report.
Wait, really? How is cutting off a quarter of the world's natural gas not the scariest part?
Well, what's fascinating here is the bottleneck mechanism. This isn't just an energy crisis, it's an everything crisis.
Okay, how so?
You have to look at what those Gulf countries, so Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, what they actually produce with that energy. They supply over 73% of the world's hydrocarbon derivatives.
Okay.
And crucially, they also supply 14.2% of global urea fertilizer.
Okay, stop right there. Urea fertilizer. How does natural gas become fertilizer?
Right, it's through something called the Haber-Bosch process. You see, you don't just burn natural gas for heat or electricity. Methane, which makes up most of natural gas, is the core chemical feedstock used to create ammonia.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and ammonia is the fundamental building block of almost all nitrogen fertilizers. So when you choke off the natural gas from the Gulf, you basically immediately paralyze global fertilizer production.
So the loss of energy directly cascades into a global food security crisis.
Violently cascades, yes.
It's less like a Jenga tower and more like a biological nervous system. Like the Strait of Hormuz isn't just a toe you can stub, it's the brainstem.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Because if you pinch it, it doesn't just hurt the Middle East. It literally stops the lungs from breathing in South America by cutting off the fertilizer they need to grow food.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And the disparity in who actually suffers when that brainstem gets pinched is frankly deeply troubling.
Yeah, the Kiel Institute report highlights that. It says the United States faces a mere negative 0.07% welfare loss.
Barely a scratch.
Exactly. Because of domestic energy production, it barely registers on the American economic radar. But energy-dependent developing nations in places like South Asia and sub-Saharan Africa,
Oh, it's devastating for them.
yeah, they face food price spikes and welfare losses that are 10 to 20 times larger than the U.S.
It's massive.
But let me challenge that for a second, though. I'm thinking back to, like, Standard Economics 101. Usually when a supply chain gets blocked, markets just adjust, right? They
Mhm.
find
It's
alternatives.
theory, sure.
Yeah, the price goes up a bit, a new supplier steps in to fill the void, and it all balances out eventually. Why is this specific bottleneck so different?
So that is the exact blind spot standard models have.
Hmm.
And it's what the Kiel Institute actually addresses, using what they call the kite bottleneck extension.
The kite bottleneck.
Yeah. Standard models assume smooth substitution. Like you said, you just swap one supplier for another. But in the short run, trade elasticities are incredibly rigid.
Trade elasticity, meaning, like, how quickly a buyer can find a backup plan if their main supplier just goes offline.
Exactly, yeah. You cannot just build a multi-billion-dollar fertilizer mega plant overnight in a different country just to make up the shortfall.
Right, that takes years.
Decades, sometimes. And a chemical refinery in Europe that's configured to run on a very specific grade of Gulf crude, it cannot instantly retool its machinery to process oil from somewhere else.
Ah, so you're stuck.
Completely stuck. The kite model proves that because there are no short-run alternatives for these highly specialized inputs, the cost penalty doesn't just pass through, it gets severely amplified as it moves down the supply chain.
Okay, so if that blocked brainstem is amplifying costs all the way down to the fingertips, how does that physical bottleneck trickle down to what you, listening right now, are actually paying for?
That's the million-dollar question.
Let's trace this directly to your wallet. Specifically, let's look at travel and the gig economy.
Right, because the cost of corporate supply shocks is almost never absorbed by the company. It is inevitably passed down to the end user.
Just look at JetBlue. They are actively hiking checked bag fees to offset soaring jet fuel costs, which, as we know, are directly tied to the Hormuz closure.
Yep.
I'm looking at their new fee structure right now, and it's aggressive. What are they charging now?
It's $39 for the first checked bag and $59 for the second bag.
Ouch.
Yeah. But the real kicker is the timing penalty. There is an extra $10 penalty per bag if you check it within 24 hours of your departure.
That's so specific. Why target the baggage? Like, why not just raise the price of the actual plane ticket by $20 and be done with it?
It comes down to how we all shop. Jet fuel makes up about a fifth of an airline's total operating expenses. So by targeting optional services like baggage, airlines can maintain highly competitive headline ticket prices on search engines.
Oh, right. Because you sort by cheapest flight.
Exactly. You see the cheap flight, you book it, and then they quietly cover their surging overhead at the check-in counter when you have to check your suitcase.
Sneaky. But we are seeing similar shockwaves hit the gig economy, too. Uber is dealing with a brutal reality at the pump right now. The national average gas price is hitting $3.98 a gallon.
And in places like California, it's over $5.80.
Right. And Uber's entire model relies on independent contractors absorbing that operating cost.
Yeah. If gas gets too expensive, the profit margin for a driver drops below minimum wage, and they simply log off the app.
They just go home, which forces Uber to step in. They are rapidly expanding their fuel relief program right now. They're allowing their top-tier drivers to save up to $1.44 per gallon.
That's a huge subsidy.
It is. They are piecing this together through a bunch of partnerships. So the Upside app gives drivers up to $1 off per gallon. Shell Fuel Rewards chips in up to 21 cents. And Uber is bumping the cash back on their own Pro card to 5%.
It's a really fascinating mitigation strategy.
Yeah.
They're trying to build this artificial buffer between global oil shocks and their localized labor force.
So what does this all mean for the consumer, though? Like, are companies like Uber genuinely protecting their drivers, or is this just a PR Band-Aid to keep the platform functioning while ultimately passing the cost to the user? Because I have to imagine these subsidies aren't free.
Right. This raises a super important question about corporate survival. Is it a Band-Aid? Yes, absolutely. Uber has to protect its labor supply first.
Because without drivers, there's no Uber.
Exactly. Without drivers, the algorithm has nothing to dispatch, and the whole platform dies. So they use these partnerships to insulate the drivers just enough to keep them on the road. But you are entirely correct. In a prolonged geopolitical crisis, those underlying costs inevitably bleed into the algorithmic surge pricing that the writer pays.
It's mind-blowing how a geographical choke point halfway across the world dictates the price of a ride to the airport.
It really is.
But if the physical supply chain is constrained by oil and water, the digital economy has its own hidden bottleneck. Only this one is driven by software efficiency.
Yeah, and this might be the most counterintuitive dynamic in the tech sector today. While physical goods are bottlenecked by scarcity, digital value is currently being bottlenecked by abundance and efficiency.
I really want to talk about Micron Technology here because their situation makes absolutely no sense on paper. This is the ultimate paradox of plenty. I'm looking at their Q2 earnings. They hit $23.86 billion in revenue. They achieved 74% non-GAAP gross margins and an earnings per share that completely obliterated what analysts expected.
$12.20. Unheard of.
Right. So by every traditional metric, this company is printing money. And yet, the stock plummeted nearly 30% in late March.
It shatters every rule of traditional value investing. You post record profits, and you lose a third of your market cap.
Why? I mean, what did the market see that the earnings report didn't show?
Well, the market wasn't looking backwards at Micron's past quarter. They were looking forward at a new research paper published by Google. It introduced an algorithm called TurboQuant.
TurboQuant. Honestly, it sounds like an energy drink.
Right.
But it apparently acted like a wrecking ball for Micron's valuation. What does TurboQuant actually do?
Simply put, it compresses memory. The algorithm is capable of reducing the memory footprint of large language models.
Yep.
So the massive AI systems running behind the scenes by up to 6 times without losing any output accuracy.
Wow. 6 times.
Yeah. And Micron makes its absolute best margins on high bandwidth memory, specifically their HBM3E chips, which are totally critical for running these massive AI models.
Ah, okay, I see the collision course here. If Google can run the exact same AI model using 1/6 of the memory hardware,
Then the demand for Micron's most profitable chips could theoretically evaporate overnight. The market just panicked over immediate demand destruction.
and complicating that panic is Micron's own spending habits, right? They just announced a $25 billion CapEx, or capital expenditure budget, for fiscal 2026 to build out more chip manufacturing factories.
Talk about bad timing.
Seriously, it feels like a restaurant ordering a massive surplus of incredibly expensive, perishable ingredients right as a new fasting fad hits the mainstream. Are they walking into a hog cycle of oversupply?
Oh, the hog cycle is the perfect way to describe the historic curse of the semiconductor industry.
Right. For those who don't know, what is that?
It refers to the agricultural phenomenon where farmers see high pork prices, they breed too many pigs, and by the time the pigs mature, the market is flooded, which crashes the price. Chip makers do the exact same thing with multi-billion-dollar fabrication plants.
But is a 30% stock drop an overreaction? If this algorithm is really that good, are hardware companies just doomed?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the reality is far less apocalyptic. Hardware booms always eventually meet software efficiency. It is the natural heartbeat of tech.
Okay, that makes sense.
And the data shows that Micron is completely sold out of their HBM3E chips for the entire calendar year of 2026. They are already leading the charge on the next generation HBM4 for NVIDIA's new Rubin platform.
So they aren't exactly hurting for buyers right now.
Not at all. Plus, the sheer volume of AI models being trained globally is growing so exponentially that even with a 6x compression algorithm, the market will likely consume all the hardware they can physically produce.
Though they aren't alone in the market. SK Hynix currently holds about 57% of the high-bandwidth memory market share, and Samsung is aggressively pivoting its factories to catch up.
Yeah, it is a brutal three-way arms race. But the core insight for you, the listener, is that digital bottlenecks are highly elastic. Just as hardware limits what software can achieve today, a single software breakthrough tomorrow can instantly alter the value of all that hardware.
Man, if a single research paper can wipe out 30% of a blue chip company's value overnight, I mean, institutional investors have massive research teams to hedge against that kind of whiplash. But how is the everyday retail investor like? The person managing their own 401k supposed to survive that?
They usually don't,
Yeah.
but that is the structural shift we are seeing right now. The rules of who gets to invest and what tools they have to protect themselves are being fundamentally rewritten.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Let's look at the SpaceX IPO. They are floating a potential initial public offering in 2026 that could raise $75 billion. which would value the company at 1.7, Sema, a 5 trillion.
Staggering number.
Unbelievable. But Elon Musk is considering reserving up to 30% of that IPO specifically for retail investors.
Which is an unprecedented allocation. Historically, the pipeline of wealth generation during an IPO is tightly controlled.
Right, by the big players.
Exactly. Institutional investors, hedge funds, and private wealth clients just swallow the vast majority of the shares before the opening bell even rings. The public gets the leftovers at a premium.
With the actual plumbing of how they distribute those retail shares is causing some friction here. The sources suggest SpaceX might cut out popular retail apps like Robinhood and SoFi.
Really?
Yeah, and instead partner exclusively with Morgan Stanley's E-Trade to capture that self-directed flow. It just shows that even when a company tries to democratize access, the legacy banks still demand to control the toll booth.
Wow. And this push for retail empowerment extends far beyond flashy tech IPOs, too. It is reaching directly into the most boring standard investment vehicle in America, your retirement account.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, on March 31st, 2026, the Department of Labor proposed a brand new safe harbor framework for ERISA-defined contribution plans.
Okay, I need an ELI 5 on this. ERISA-defined contribution plans. We're just talking about standard 401ks here.
Correct. Your standard run-of-the-mill employer-sponsored 401k.
And what exactly was the bottleneck keeping my 401k from investing in anything interesting before this?
Honestly, fear of litigation. Historically, the fiduciaries, so the people hired by your company to select the investment options on your 401k menu, were terrified of being sued by employees if an investment lost money.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah. So to protect themselves, they only offered the safest, most boring, highly liquid index funds.
Which means everyday workers miss out on the massive growth happening in, like, private equity or real estate. So what does this new Department of Labor rule actually do?
The DOL wants to achieve what they call asset neutrality. They want to allow fiduciaries to safely offer alternative assets without the constant, paralyzing fear of a class action lawsuit.
Yeah.
So they created a process-based safe harbor.
Meaning they basically gave them a checklist. The DLL outlined 6 specific factors fiduciaries have to objectively evaluate: performance, fees, liquidity, valuation, benchmarking, and complexity.
Exactly. It's essentially legal armor. The DOL is saying, look, if you thoroughly document your decision-making process using these 6 metrics, you are legally presumed to have acted prudently, regardless of the ultimate investment outcome.
So it shifts the legal focus from did this investment make money to did you do your homework before offering it?
Precisely. Both SpaceX opening its IPO to the public and the DOL giving 401k managers this legal armor, they represent the exact same philosophy. They're opening the bottlenecks of wealth generation to the public, but insisting on heavy structured guardrails.
But whether it's a geopolitical crisis, a shifting tech market, or new regulatory rules, surviving these bottlenecks all comes down to who is actually driving the bus. Let's look at corporate leadership for a minute.
Okay.
We have 3 vastly different examples of corporate governance in our stack that show how leaders are navigating this chaos.
Because abstract market forces eventually require concrete human decisions.
Very true. First, we have an example of global expansion. NIO, the Chinese electric vehicle maker, just opened its first Latin American store in Costa Rica, but they aren't using the direct-to-consumer model that Tesla popularized.
Right.
They are using an asset-light distributor model, partnering with a massive local dealer called Horizontes Cielo Azul.
I'm really glad you brought up the model because it's a brilliant risk mitigation strategy. Building international infrastructure from scratch, so buying real estate, hiring mechanics, navigating foreign labor laws, is incredibly capital-intensive and risky.
Huge overhead.
Yeah. By using an asset-light model, NIO simply supplies the vehicles, and the local partner assumes all the overhead and operational risk. It allows NIO to rapidly test a new market without really anchoring themselves to it, and they are aggressively testing it. They brought 3 distinct vehicle brands at once to Costa Rica.
So that's expansion through partnership. Now let's look at legacy leadership. Air Canada just announced the retirement of their CEO, Michael Rousseau, by Q3 2026.
Wow, end of an era.
It really is. This guy has steered the airline through 2 decades of existential crises. You got the 2007 financial collapse, the COVID-19 pandemic, the massive Aeroplan loyalty acquisition, and he even managed to restore their pension solvency.
He is basically a study in navigating chronic bottlenecks. But from a governance perspective, the most fascinating detail is the board's criteria for his successor. They explicitly stated that French language ability is a key performance criterion for the next CEO.
Really? That's super interesting. It proves that not all bottlenecks are financial. Air Canada is headquartered in Montreal. It highlights how cultural and regional identity remains a non-negotiable metric in global governance, even for a massive multinational corporation.
It anchors the global to the local.
Exactly. Which brings us to our third example of leadership, which is honestly pretty grim. We are looking at corporate deception. The Federal Trade Commission just filed a massive lawsuit against Occupid and its parent company, Match Group.
Oh, this one is rough.
Yeah.
This is a textbook breach of consumer trust, and it exposes the hidden data bottleneck. Occupid made very explicit promises to its users regarding privacy, but the FTC alleges they secretly share the photos, demographics, and precise locations of 3 million users with a completely unrelated third-party firm.
And the reason why they did it is what caught my eye. It wasn't to improve the matchmaking algorithm. They bypassed their own privacy controls and shared that incredibly sensitive data simply because Occupid's founders were financial investors in that third-party firm.
It completely commodifies human intimacy.
It's disgusting. The real aha moment here is realizing that to Occupid, the product wasn't the dating algorithm. The product was your vulnerability. When you shared your location to find a date, you thought you were engaging in a social contract.
Right.
But to the executives, your intimacy was just a coupon they could trade to boost their outside stock portfolios. It's the ultimate hidden bottleneck, a bottleneck of corporate ethics.
And according to the FTC, they even took steps to obstruct the investigation when they got caught. It forces you to consider how your data is treated as an asset class across the entire digital economy.
But let me push back on the regulatory response here. The FTC reached a settlement that basically just forces them to stop lying about their privacy policies. If you stand to make millions on an outside investment by secretly sharing data, does a simple FTC settlement actually change corporate behavior?
Probably not.
Right. Or is a privacy fine just a calculated cost of doing business in 2020 cents?
Yeah. That raises a super important question about the teeth of our regulatory agencies. If the financial upside of data brokering vastly outweighs the penalty of getting caught, the fine simply becomes an operational expense. The bottleneck wasn't a lack of regulation, it was a fundamental failure of internal corporate ethics. Behind every algorithm, there are human executives deciding what your privacy is worth.
It really is all connected. We started this deep dive looking at a physical stretch of water in the Middle East. That blocked Strait of Hormuz pinches the global brainstem, which hikes the price of your Uber ride and spikes your grocery bill because the fertilizer supply chain breaks down.
Then we saw how a single Google algorithm compressing software models can wipe out billions of dollars in hardware value for a titan like Micron.
And we end by seeing how your dating app data is traded like a literal commodity, while new rules from the Department of Labor try to build legal armor to protect your 401k as alternative assets flood the retail market.
Yeah, whether you are deciding to participate in the SpaceX retail IPO, managing your retirement portfolio under these new DOL rules, or just trying to budget for JetBlue baggage fees, understanding these hidden bottlenecks gives you a distinct edge.
Definitely.
The world is incredibly complex, but the causality, the physical mechanism of how one event triggers another can always be tracked if you know where to look.
Which brings us back to the reality of the global economy. The pipes might be hidden behind the walls, but the flow of value, of data, and of resources is very real. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over long after this deep dive ends. As algorithms learn to compress the massive memory needs of AI, and as global supply chains continue to fracture under geopolitical stress, consider this. Will the future economy be defined not by the nations or companies that possess the most raw resources, but by the ones who write the most resilient algorithms to manage scarcity?
It is the question that will define the next decade of innovation.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration of the sources. Keep asking questions, keep looking for the hidden bottlenecks dictating your world, and we will see you on the next deep dive.